They're putting you in a nursing home and taking your savings today, Grandma Elaine." Those innocent words from my 8-year-old granddaughter Sophie made my blood run cold as I stood in my kitchen in Birmingham, Alabama, stirring a pot of vegetable soup. I nearly dropped the wooden spoon as the weight of her statement hit me like a physical blow. My name is Elaine Patterson, and at 69 years old I thought I had seen every kind of betrayal life could offer. I was wrong. Standing there in the home I had lived in for 43 years, watching Sophie color at my kitchen table while her parents were out running errands, I realized that my own son Benjamin and his wife Victoria had been plotting against me with surgical precision. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady as my heart hammered against my ribs. Sophie looked up from her coloring book, her crayon still moving across the paper as if she were discussing the weather. "Mommy and Daddy were talking about it last night. They said you're getting too old to live by yourself, and they need to take care of your money so bad people don't steal it." She paused, selecting a purple crayon. "Daddy said something about papers and a judge, and Mommy was really excited about finally getting to buy that big house she wants." The room seemed to tilt sideways. I gripped the counter, my knuckles white as I processed what Sophie had just revealed. For months, Benjamin and Victoria had been expressing increasing concern about my declining mental state, despite the fact that I managed my own finances, maintained my home, and continued volunteering at the local literacy center 3 days a week. Their sudden attention to my well-being had felt suspicious, but I had convinced myself I was being paranoid. Now I understood the truth. They weren't concerned about my welfare at all. They were positioning themselves to have me declared incompetent so they could access my $1.2 million estate. The thought made my stomach churn with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. This was my son, the boy I had raised alone after his father died when Benjamin was 12. I had worked 2 jobs to put him through college, sacrificed my own dreams to ensure he had every opportunity. "Are you okay, Grandma?" Sophie asked, noticing my silence. I forced a smile, though inside I felt like something fundamental had shattered. "I'm fine, honey. Keep coloring." But I wasn't fine. I was furious, and more importantly, I was determined. If Benjamin and Victoria thought they could manipulate a supposedly confused old woman, they were about to discover just how sharp my mind really was. As Sophie continued coloring, my mind raced through the past 6 months, connecting dots I had previously dismissed. Benjamin's sudden interest in my memory lapses, when I occasionally misplaced my keys. Victoria's pointed comments about the burden of maintaining such a large house. Their questions about my financial advisor, my attorney, and whether I had updated my will recently. The most chilling realization was how calculated their approach had been. Benjamin worked as an insurance claims investigator, which meant he understood exactly how competency hearings worked. Victoria, a former medical office manager, knew the right medical professionals to consult for favorable evaluations. Together, they had been building a case against me while pretending to be loving family members concerned for my welfare. I thought back to last week when Benjamin had insisted on accompanying me to my doctor's appointment. At the time, I had been touched by his attention. Now I realized he had probably been trying to plant seeds of doubt about my mental capacity with Dr. Harrison. The way he had interrupted me during the consultation, finishing my sentences and suggesting I was confused about my medications, suddenly took on a sinister meaning. Victoria's behavior made sense now, too. Her recent visits had included subtle suggestions about how difficult it must be for me to manage household finances. She had offered multiple times to help me organize my paperwork, claiming she wanted to ensure all my important documents were safely stored. When I had politely declined, she had pressed harder, suggesting that keeping track of bills and investments was becoming too stressful for someone my age. The cruelest part was how they had used Sophie in their scheme. My granddaughter had been encouraged to report back about Grandma's confusion after each visit. I remembered Sophie mentioning that her parents asked detailed questions about whether I seemed to forget things or repeat myself. They had turned an innocent child into an unwitting spy against her own grandmother. What broke my heart most was understanding that their sudden family dinners and weekend visits hadn't been motivated by love or genuine concern. Every moment of closeness had been manufactured to gather intelligence for their legal case. Benjamin's recent suggestion that I sign some updated documents for my safety now revealed itself as an attempt to trick me into signing papers that would make their legal theft easier. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated me completely. I hadn't built a successful consulting business and accumulated significant wealth by being naive or easily manipulated. If they wanted to play hardball with an old woman, they were about to learn that this particular grandmother had spent decades outmaneuvering people who thought they were smarter than her. The irony was that in their greed and eagerness to share their plans, they had revealed everything to the one person who would never keep their secrets, an 8-year-old child who trusted her grandmother completely. After Sophie revealed their plan, I realized I had perhaps 3 hours before Benjamin and Victoria returned, from what they had told me was a shopping trip to pick up dinner. Now I understood they were likely finalizing arrangements with the nursing home and preparing whatever legal documents they planned to ambush me with. The timeline was tight, but I had spent my career handling crisis situations under pressure. My first call was to Patricia Wong, my attorney and one of the smartest legal minds I knew. We had worked together when I sold my consulting firm 5 years ago, and she understood exactly how important my independence was to me. "Patricia, I need your help immediately," I said, explaining Sophie's revelation. "They're planning to have me declared incompetent, probably as early as today." Her response was swift and decisive. "Elaine, we need to establish an irrevocable trust right now. How quickly can you get to my office?" "I can't leave. They'll be back soon, and I need to be here when they arrive with whatever paperwork they've prepared." I could hear Patricia typing rapidly on her computer. "Then we'll do this over the phone and fax. I'm preparing the documents now. You'll need to transfer your major assets into a trust with Sophie as the primary beneficiary. Once it's irrevocable, Benjamin and Victoria can't touch those funds even if they somehow succeed with their competency case." My next call was to Robert Kim, my financial advisor at North Peak Engineering's investment division. We had maintained my portfolio conservatively but profitably for 15 years. "Robert, I need to execute some emergency transfers today. How quickly can we move my investments into a different structure?" "Elaine, if this is about asset protection, we can have most of your holdings transferred within 2 hours. What exactly are we protecting against?" I explained the situation, and Robert's professional calm cracked slightly. "That's unconscionable. Let me start the paperwork immediately. We'll move everything into the trust structure your attorney is creating." While Sophie hummed quietly over her coloring book, I systematically dismantled my son's inheritance expectations. The house deed was transferred into the trust. My investment accounts, including the substantial holdings from my business sale, were moved beyond Benjamin and Victoria's reach. Even my checking and savings accounts were restructured so that any court order they might obtain would find nearly empty accounts. The final call was to my neighbor, Joyce Martinez, a retired social worker who understood family dynamics better than most. "Joyce, I need a witness to come over in about an hour, and I might need you to take Sophie home to her parents if things get complicated." "Of course, honey. What's going on?" "My family is about to learn that underestimating a grandmother is a very expensive mistake." As I hung up the phone, I looked at Sophie, still peacefully coloring. In 2 hours, her innocent revelation would save my independence and teach her parents that greed comes with consequences they never imagined. The documents arrived by courier at exactly 3:30 p.m., 45 minutes before Benjamin and Victoria were scheduled to return. Patricia had worked with remarkable speed, creating an ironclad irrevocable trust that removed virtually all my assets from any potential legal reach. As I signed the final papers with Joyce Martinez as my witness, I felt a mixture of sadness and grim satisfaction. "Elaine, are you sure about this?" Joyce asked, reviewing the trust documents. "This is a significant step." "Joyce, my son is planning to have me declared mentally incompetent so he can steal my money and warehouse me in a nursing home. Sophie told me their entire plan." I signed my name with steady hands. This isn't just about protecting my assets. It's about protecting my dignity and my granddaughter's future. Joyce's expression hardened. As a former social worker, she had seen elder abuse in many forms. What they're planning is criminal. Have you considered involving adult protective services? First, I want them to experience the consequences of their greed. Then we'll see what legal action is appropriate. I folded the completed trust documents and placed them in my desk drawer. For now, I want them to walk into their own trap. At 4:15 p.m., I heard Benjamin's car pull into my driveway. Through the window, I watched him and Victoria exit the vehicle with purposeful expressions. Victoria carried a manila folder thick with documents, while Benjamin had what appeared to be a clipboard with official-looking papers. They moved with the confidence of people who believed they held all the cards. Sophie looked up from her coloring book as they entered through the front door. "Mommy, Daddy, Grandma and I made cookies and I told her about your surprise." Victoria's face went pale. "What surprise, sweetie?" "About the nursing home and taking Grandma's money. You said it was supposed to be a secret, but Grandma makes the best cookies when she's happy, so I thought she should know early." The silence in my living room was deafening. Benjamin and Victoria exchanged a look of pure panic while I smiled serenely from my armchair. Joyce, still seated at my kitchen table, observed the scene with professional interest. "Hello, Benjamin. Victoria." I kept my voice warm and grandmotherly. "Sophie tells me you have some interesting plans to discuss." Benjamin recovered first, his insurance investigator training kicking in. "Mom, we need to talk. We've been concerned about your ability to live independently, and we've found a wonderful facility where you'll receive proper care." "How thoughtful of you." I gestured to the manila folder. "Are those the commitment papers?" Victoria's composure cracked. "Elaine, you don't understand. The house is too much for you to maintain. Your finances are becoming complicated. We're trying to protect you from people who might take advantage. People like yourselves." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Benjamin set down his clipboard and attempted to regain control of the conversation. "Mother, I know this is difficult, but we've consulted with medical professionals. There are concerns about your cognitive function that need to be addressed through proper legal channels." "I see. And I suppose those proper legal channels involve having me declared incompetent so you can access my $1.2 million estate?" I watched their faces as I spoke the exact amount. "Did you think I didn't know what I was worth, Benjamin?" Victoria's mask finally slipped completely. "We're not trying to steal anything. We're trying to ensure your money is properly managed before you lose it all to confusion or scammers. The only scammers I see are standing in my living room, attempting to defraud an elderly woman with the help of falsified medical evaluations and forged documents." Benjamin's face flushed red as he realized their carefully constructed plan was unraveling. "Mom, you're being paranoid. We would never try to hurt you. This is about keeping you safe." "Safe from what exactly?" "I manage my own finances, maintain my home, volunteer regularly, and have been mentally sharp enough to see through your scheme for months." I stood up from my armchair, feeling stronger and more determined than I had in years. "The only thing I need protection from is my own family's greed." Victoria stepped forward, her voice taking on a desperate edge. "You can't just dismiss our concerns. We've spent months researching the best care options for you. We've invested time and money into finding solutions for your declining condition." "My declining condition?" I laughed, a sound that held no warmth. "Victoria, you mean the condition you and Benjamin have been fabricating? The memory lapses you've been documenting? The confusion you've been reporting to medical professionals?" Benjamin tried a different approach, his voice becoming pleading. "Mom, even if you disagree with our methods, you have to admit that managing a large estate at your age is stressful. Wouldn't it be easier to let us handle the financial responsibilities while you focus on enjoying your retirement? Enjoying my retirement in a nursing home you've selected, while you enjoy spending my money on the house Victoria has been dreaming about?" I walked to my desk and retrieved the trust documents. I'm afraid that plan has encountered a significant obstacle. Joyce stood up from the kitchen table, ready to support me if needed. Sophie continued coloring, blissfully unaware that her innocent revelation had destroyed her parents' carefully laid plans. "What obstacle?" Victoria demanded, her composure completely shattered now. I held up the trust documents. "The obstacle of an attorney who works quickly and a grandmother who isn't nearly as confused as you hoped she would be." Benjamin snatched the papers from my hands, scanning them rapidly. His face went from red to ashen as he read. "This can't be legal. You can't just give away our inheritance." "Your inheritance?" My voice turned ice cold. "Benjamin, these assets were never yours. They were mine to do with as I chose, and I chose to protect them from children who plan to steal them through legal manipulation." Victoria grabbed the documents from Benjamin, her hands shaking as she read. "The house? The investments? Everything is gone? How is that possible?" "It's possible because while you were out making final arrangements to commit me against my will, I was making arrangements to ensure my granddaughter's future is secure from her parents' greed." I sat back down, feeling a deep satisfaction. "Every asset you plan to steal is now in an irrevocable trust with Sophie as the primary beneficiary." "This is insane!" Victoria screamed, throwing the papers onto my coffee table. "You can't just disinherit your own family because of some misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Joyce spoke for the first time since they had arrived. "I'm a retired social worker, and what you two planned constitutes elder abuse. There's no misunderstanding about stealing someone's independence and assets through fraudulent competency proceedings." Benjamin's professional training finally kicked in, and he realized the legal jeopardy they were facing. "Mom, we can work this out. We can find a compromise that makes everyone happy." "The time for compromise ended when you decided to treat me like an incompetent obstacle to your financial goals, rather than like your mother." Victoria's desperation reached a crescendo as the full implications of their failed scheme sank in. "You don't understand. We've already made commitments based on accessing that money. We put a down payment on a house. Benjamin quit his job because we thought we'd be managing your estate." "You quit your job?" I stared at my son in disbelief. "You were so confident in your ability to steal my assets that you quit your job before you even succeeded?" Benjamin's face crumpled as he realized how thoroughly they had miscalculated. "It wasn't stealing, Mom. It was planning for the future. We knew you'd eventually need care, and we wanted to be prepared to provide it. By having me declared mentally incompetent, by committing me to a nursing home against my will, by taking control of assets I spent 40 years building." My voice rose with each question. "Benjamin, you were 12 when your father died. I worked 2 jobs to put you through college. I sacrificed my own comfort to ensure you had every opportunity. And this is how you repay that sacrifice?" Sophie looked up from her coloring book, finally sensing the tension in the room. "Why is everyone yelling? Did I do something wrong by telling Grandma about the surprise?" The innocent question cut through the room like a blade. Victoria and Benjamin realized that their own daughter had exposed their plan because they had been careless enough to discuss it in front of her. Their greed had made them sloppy, and now an 8-year-old child had destroyed months of careful preparation. "No, sweetheart," I said gently. "You did exactly the right thing by telling Grandma the truth. Honesty is always the best choice." Benjamin made one final desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Mom, please. Let's sit down and discuss this rationally. We can undo the trust. We can find a solution that works for everyone." "The trust is irrevocable, Benjamin. Even if I wanted to undo it, which I don't, it's legally impossible. Every asset you plan to steal is now permanently beyond your reach." I picked up the commitment papers he had brought. "Were you planning to have me sign these today? Or were you going to forge my signature like I suspect you've done on other documents?" Victoria burst into tears, the weight of their financial ruin finally hitting her. "We're going to lose everything. The house deposit, Benjamin's job, our credit rating. How are we supposed to explain this to Sophie?" Perhaps you should explain it the same way you explained your plan to steal from her grandmother, Joyce suggested coldly. Children deserve honesty about their parents' character. I stood up and walked to my front door, opening it wide. I think it's time for you to leave. Sophie can stay here tonight if she wants, or Joyce can drive her home when you've had time to process this situation. Benjamin gathered up the useless commitment papers, his hands shaking. This isn't over, Mom. We can challenge the trust. We can prove you were coerced or confused when you signed it. By all means, challenge it. Patricia Wong would love to depose you both about your plan to commit fraud against an elderly family member. I'm sure that legal discovery process will be fascinating for everyone involved. I maintained my position by the open door. You have 30 seconds to leave my property before I call the police to report an attempted elder abuse scheme. They left without another word. Victoria still crying, and Benjamin staring straight ahead with the expression of a man who had just watched his future crumble. As their car pulled away, Sophie looked up at me with wide eyes. Grandma, are Mommy and Daddy in trouble? Yes, sweetheart, but sometimes people have to face consequences when they make very bad choices. The next morning brought a series of frantic phone calls that I let go to voicemail. Benjamin's voice grew increasingly desperate with each message, while Victoria's calls devolved into angry demands that I fix this mess immediately. By noon, they appeared at my door again, this time with a different strategy. Mom, we've spoken with our attorney, Benjamin announced, his voice artificially calm. He believes the trust can be challenged on grounds of undue influence. Patricia Wong clearly took advantage of your emotional state. I invited them in with a smile. How interesting. And what does your attorney think about your plan to have me declared incompetent through falsified medical evaluations? Victoria's composure was already cracking. We never falsified anything. We had legitimate concerns about your mental state. Concerns you documented by coaching Sophie to report my supposed confusion? Concerns you supported by interrupting my doctor's appointments to suggest I was becoming incompetent? I pulled out a folder I had prepared overnight. Fortunately, I've been documenting your behavior as well. Benjamin's face went pale as I showed them photographs of documents they had left behind during previous visits, recordings of conversations where they discussed my supposed declining condition, and a detailed timeline of their activities over the past 6 months. Patricia helped me compile quite an impressive case for attempted elder fraud, I continued. We have enough evidence to pursue criminal charges, not just civil litigation. You recorded us, Victoria screamed. That's illegal. Not when it's done to protect myself from family members planning to commit crimes against me. Alabama law is very clear about self-defense recordings in cases of suspected elder abuse. Benjamin realized they were completely outmaneuvered. What do you want from us, Mom? I want you to understand that your greed has cost you everything. Sophie's college fund is secure, but your inheritance is gone forever. Your attempt to steal from me has backfired spectacularly. The beautiful irony was that their scheme had been so elaborate, so calculated, that it provided perfect evidence of their criminal intent. Joyce arrived just as Benjamin and Victoria were preparing to leave, bringing with her a representative from Adult Protective Services and a detective who specialized in elder fraud cases. The timing was perfect, though I had not orchestrated their arrival. Mrs. Patterson, Detective Williams introduced himself. We received a report about a potential elder abuse case involving attempted financial exploitation. Victoria's face went from red to white in seconds. This is harassment. We were trying to help Elaine. By having her declared incompetent so you could access her assets? Detective Williams consulted his notes. We've reviewed the evidence Mrs. Patterson provided, including recordings of conversations where you discussed your plan to commit her against her will. Benjamin tried to assert some control over the rapidly deteriorating situation. We haven't broken any laws. We were concerned about our mother's welfare and explored legal options for ensuring her care. Legal options that included falsifying reports about her mental condition and attempting to trick her into signing documents that would facilitate your access to her assets. The Adult Protective Services representative spoke up. Mr. Patterson, Attempted financial exploitation of an elderly person is a felony in Alabama. I watched my son's face as he realized that their carefully planned scheme had not only failed, but had exposed them to serious criminal liability. Victoria began crying again, understanding that their financial ruin was now compounded by potential jail time. "The irony," I said quietly, "is that if you had simply been honest about your financial problems, I might have been willing to help. Instead, your greed has cost you everything, including your relationship with Sophie and your standing in this family." Detective Williams handed Benjamin a card. "You'll want to contact an attorney. We'll be filing charges by the end of the week." As they were escorted out, I felt a profound sense of justice served and protection secured. Benjamin and Victoria faced devastating consequences that extended far beyond their failed inheritance grab. The criminal charges for attempted elder fraud resulted in felony convictions that destroyed Benjamin's career in insurance and made Victoria unemployable in any position requiring financial trust, while their early withdrawal from Benjamin's retirement accounts to fund their premature house purchase created massive tax penalties they couldn't afford to pay. Their marriage crumbled under the financial pressure and mutual blame, leading to a bitter divorce where Sophie chose to live primarily with me rather than with parents who had proven themselves willing to exploit family members for money. The social stigma of their attempted elder abuse scheme made them pariahs in our community, where word spread quickly about the couple who had tried to steal their own mother's independence and assets through fraudulent legal manipulation. As I tucked Sophie into bed in what was now her permanent room in my house, I reflected on how their greed had inadvertently given me the greatest gift possible: full custody of my granddaughter and the chance to raise her with values they had clearly never learned. Looking back on my journey from potential victim to victorious grandmother, I realized that sometimes the most important inheritance we can leave is not money, but the lesson that wisdom, preparation, and strategic thinking will always triumph over greed, and the foolish assumption that age equals vulnerability.
Tôi cảm xúc